So now we move on to the first presentation. We're honored to have with us one of our newest scientific board members, Victoria Banyard, who's brought the troops with her, Reverend Gena Jefferson and Joanne Mathias. They'll be talking to us about creating a safer and healthier world, lessons from resiliency research and positive youth development. Just briefly, you do have the bios for them. Let me just say a few things about them. Vicky Banyard has dedicated her academic career to finding better ways to help communities prevent and respond to interpersonal violence. Her research underscores the importance of listening well to the strength of survivors and empowering those in a position to help them with the best practices available. She regularly collaborates with practitioners and community agencies in community engaged approaches to research. She's the author of nearly 200 articles and book chapters, and regularly teaches courses on the causes, consequence, and prevention of interpersonal violence. Reverend Gena Jefferson, welcome to our family. Thank you for joining us. It's great to have you. Reverend Gena Jefferson is the founder of Just As I Am Youth Empowerment, a leadership program promoting mental health, mental wellness, mindfulness, and moral development in youth. Her work for over 30 years has focused on impacting youth, families, and professionals in the areas of positive youth development, mindfulness, education, and fostering resilience in communities of color through healing, justice, and mental wellness education. And finally, Joanne Mathias is a 27-year-old who loves to teach and inspire the youth. And she is a JI Youth alum and has been facilitating workshops for youth revolving around special and emotional learning. She hopes one day to become a life coach with a large social media presence to create safe spaces for youth and young adults. And I'll pass it on to you now, Vicky. Thank you for joining us.
Great. Thank you so much for having us. Really excited to see the worldwide audience. And it's okay if we just jump in. I know we're a little before 9 o'clock. Etienne, is it all right? We just get going or what? Yeah. Okay, great. So Joanne and Gena, do you have anything else you want to say at introducing yourselves before I show our slides?
No, I just want to say thank you, Etienne and Don and Ashna, for us being here. It's a pleasure to be here. This would be Joanne's first keynote speaker and talk. Yesterday was her birthday, so I think we're right on time with supporting youth and giving them a platform. So thank you.
I echo that with Ms. Gena. So I'm grateful to be here.
Great. All right, I'm going to pull up our slides. Hopefully everyone can see that. Great. So I'm going to get us started very briefly to just frame our conversation, to just give you a little roadmap about the next 90 minutes. I'm going to start by giving us a little bit of a research roadmap because I am joined with my fabulously wise and amazing practitioner colleagues. And though I have practiced in my past, I am ultimately a research geek. So I'm going to set a little bit of the research context, share a little bit of some of the research that I've done on program evaluation and related to resilience in youth. And then we're going to take a really deep dive. My colleague Gena Jefferson is going to share a little bit about Just As I Am Youth Empowerment, or JAIA. And then we're going to actually engage in a conversation. So we're going to have this as more of a keynote conversation where I'm going to step back and be the interviewer and interview my fabulous colleagues who are with us today. So we will get started. And actually, I'm just going to pull up one thing. I'm going to stop sharing for a second. Sorry. I had 9 o'clock in my mind, and it's good to be ahead of the game, but I need to get our interview script up. So sorry about that.
While you're doing that, Vicki, I just wanted to say to Don and Etienne, I really appreciate this space where you're talking about violence of all types. And I really appreciate you starting out the conference with those statistics and with acknowledging the grief that is prevalent right here in all over the world due to various types of violence. So I just want to acknowledge that because I think these are things that we really want to stay aware of, what's happening every day in the world. Yeah. So
thank you. That was really awesome and gets us back to where we needed to be. So, okay, here we are on a Friday, having a Friday here. Great. So I wanted to just center us a little bit in the research, and I've been doing research on prevention, violence prevention for many years. And really, I think we're at a moment where we have learned a lot of things, but we know there's a lot that we still need to learn. And I think that some of the areas of work that have really been impressing me as pushing us to think in some new directions are very much the positive youth development models that really talk about multifaceted strengths and skills of young people. I've had the good fortune to work with several colleagues on what we call our resilience portfolio models, but really the idea of measuring strengths. I think that I was trained as a clinical psychologist early on in my career and did clinical work in the trauma field. I know many of you are practitioners in schools and in nonprofits and in mental health. And I think we can all agree that we've spent a lot of time learning how to measure risk factors, learning how to measure symptoms. All of those things are important. They cause people distress, and we need to understand them. But we've been a lot slower to measure strengths. And I think one of the themes that will come from today is also that if you're not looking for them, you probably won't find them. But as soon as you start looking for them, you find that they're everywhere. I think there also is a large and growing body of research on youth empowerment, on mentoring, things related to civic engagement, leadership. They come with lots of different titles, but they're very, very relevant to violence prevention. So I wanted to just put a few of these buckets out there because I think they're work that's not necessarily specific to violence and yet has a lot of really important lessons for us in terms of understanding violence prevention and response and intervention. So one of the things that I've done research on is what we've called the resilience portfolio model. And a number of years ago, maybe about 10 years ago now, I had the chance to work with colleagues Sherry Hamby and John Gritch. And we did a large community study in the rural US, in the South. And we had people from ages 11 to 75 in our study. And we did both qualitative and quantitative. It was a mixed method study to really try to understand how people describe and manifest strengths, right? And we also did a huge literature review within resilience science. And from all of this, what we really found was that we could kind of organize these sets of strengths that people have, the things that are internal to them, right? But that also connect them to the outside world into 3 domains. And we talk about regulatory strengths, emotion awareness and regulation, interpersonal strengths related to compassion, social support, and then also meaning making, a sense of purpose, of optimism. It could be religious or spiritual involvement, cultural traditions, a sense of mattering. And what we found was really that over and above, when we had this large sample of about 3,000 community members. And what we found is, not surprisingly, when you put lots of measures of trauma and adversity into the research equations, that explained different outcomes, well-being outcomes, physical health perceptions, a sense of well-being, all of those kinds of things. But over and above that, these various strengths also were really helping us understand well-being and really telling us, okay, these are things we haven't been paying enough attention to. And one of the biggest lessons that came out is this idea of polystrengths. And I think that positive youth development models have this as well, that it's not any one strength. There's no one magic bullet that you need to have, but that the more of different somethings that you have, the better off you'll be. But that gives us lots of opportunities in lots of different ways to kind of create that dose or that sense of polystrengths. These are a number of so I've had the chance to work more on some of these strengths, particularly related to violence prevention. We just, with my colleague Katie Edwards and many colleagues out in the Great Plains region of the US, we just completed a 5-year evaluation of a youth-led, it was a partnership between youth and adults, violence prevention, and found some pretty exciting findings. This is the Youth Voices in Prevention, Youth VIP project. Youth did a lot of visual art in the community as part of their diffusion. The idea was this was an after-school program where youth went to camps, leadership camps, and learned best practices and evidence-based for sexual and relationship violence prevention. And then the youth created things like what you're seeing here, conversations, community events, things to teach other youth and adults in the community about prevention. And we found that, youth were really great leaders on prevention. So this 37% figure is the percentage of youth who didn't actually go to any of the training. So they didn't become interns and do the programming, but they heard other youth in schools and in the community talking about youth VIP and talking about some of the lessons of prevention. And 1 in 4 of the youth that didn't engage directly in youth VIP activities said they had a conversation with a peer about some of the materials. So these are some of the things that youth had to say. We also did Photo Voice, which is a participatory action research project. This was one of the photos that the youth took. All the small rocks make a bigger rock in the shadow. They come together as one. Sometimes we need to have more than one source of support. I feel like it's easier to make bad decisions when you have less support than you would if you had more support. And these other quotes are from our process evaluation about how the program opened my eyes to see what's actually wrong and what we need to do. Usually I wouldn't do anything. I don't know what to say, but this training makes me want to do something. All the skills you've learned, you want to put to the test. And then another youth, I'm a little more proud of myself because instead of saying I want to change, I'm trying to be the change. This is another project. This is one of the first projects I had the really good fortune to work on with my colleague, Gena Jefferson, who you'll hear from in a minute. And this is a project, Project Dream, Own, Tell, through the New York City Alliance Against Sexual Assault. And this is an intensive youth leadership training program, but what this slide is about is the youth partnered with staff from the Alliance to create a 4-hour adult and parent training related to healthy relationships and communication about prevention. And we did a little bit of an evaluation and found high levels of feasibility and acceptability, much enthusiasm, especially from adults, about learning from youth. And then this slide is sort of the ending of my section, but I've also begun to do some work now on suicide prevention. I know we have a speaker coming up next that I'm looking forward to around self-harm and youth. And one of the things we did in a recent study was trying to understand what adolescents and young adults wanted to know in terms of suicide prevention. So we know that about 80% of our sample had some kind of prevention exposure, and yet they were saying they still wanted to learn more. And they wanted to know things like warning signs to identify when someone needed help. They wanted more community resources, including resources in schools. They wanted a strengths focus. How do they build connections? A sense of mattering and belonging, strengths-based coping, not only to help others, but to help themselves. And then, because as I was saying to my colleagues, I always have to put the purple bus in every one of my presentations. This is our purple bus at Rutgers, which is our violence prevention bus. The youth also talk a lot about wanting to change community, wanting to change norms. And so really looking outside themselves in some important ways. And I'll just close with, this is a youth leader in one of our projects about being in bad situations, but you keep trying and you're persistent with the way you do things and you don't give in. You're persistent enough, eventually you can still do. It's your decision what you're going to do. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to mute myself and turn it over to my colleague, Gena Jefferson.
Thank you, Vicki. Thank you. Just as I am youth empowerment, is a nonprofit organization, personal development and leadership program. We founded Jaya, well, I founded Jaya in 2010. We incorporated as a nonprofit in 2014. And again, I had been teaching in the New York City public school systems for over 22 years by then. And I was a district liaison as a social worker. I was a district liaison, and I was in charge of academic interventions in the school systems. And, speaking of violence and trauma, these young people were really, really in need of many things besides the academic work, as well as the academic work. And so there were times where I was, in my office as a social worker, allowing a young person just time to get herself together, comb her hair, and find a new T-shirt after a fight, and there's just so much violence and trauma, and there's little time in the school system to address it. And so I founded Jaya when I in response to wanting to help to deal with some of those issues. You can go to the next slide. So our mission is to partner with young people, to co-create with them, and to promote mindful, healthy, safe communities through their own personal leadership development first, as well. And then as they work on their own personal issues and build on their strengths, as Vicki is saying, then they're more equipped to work in the community and bring that knowledge and really, really stand in that knowledge in the community. And so we imagine a world where young people are valued and included in creating healthier communities. Thank you, Vicki. Next slide. So at Jaya, we call them giants. Anyone who goes through any of our programs, they discover their passion, their identity. We spend a lot of time talking about identity because as adolescents, they're often putting themselves aside and looking at someone else to think that that person's better than them. And we encourage them to develop and have a relationship with their own identity, connect with something, a purpose, a sense of purpose, as Vicki was saying, in the as a strength in meaning making. And we also help them create a healing path of their own, that they can deal with some of the issues that they're dealing with as they move towards their vision. Next slide. Thank you. Our work focuses on creating spaces for Black, Indigenous, youth of color, youth from immigrant families, and youth from the LGBT community, because they're extremely marginalized groups, and so we do it like an extra push to make sure we have space for them in our curriculum, in our programs. Our work is, open to youth of all cultures, and we like to have a very diverse group of young people, and as well as our staff, and we promote mindful leadership. So when we say we promote mindful leadership, it's all through our whole program. It's not just with the youth, it's everybody, the volunteers, the staff, and the youth together. We are together daily creating a healthy community by taking accountability for our own actions, being clear about how we want to communicate together. It's a constant thing. Thank you. Next slide. So the core pieces of our program come from social emotional learning framework, mental health literacy and advocacy. Positive youth development is definitely the pillar that we stand on. The mindfulness curriculum that each of our trainers use is Learning to Breathe curriculum. And in order to come together in a sense of purpose and a sense of mattering and and really come together in a culture. We study life principles like acceptance, accountability, trust, love, even things that every culture values. And we use those as a lens for developing how we want to move together. And for the youth, we like to create a place where they get to decide what morals, what spiritual development they want for themselves. Next slide. So this is an example of our flyer to the young people. The Mindful Leaders Institute is our main program. It's a 3-year program. It starts with the focus on body, mind, and spirit, and just getting to know oneself. And so our ultimate goal is that they understand that healing and social justice is important and is for theirs to claim and to work through. Healthy relationships is huge. And then mental health education so that they can understand what's happening for them and others in their community. Next slide. So our 3-year program, the first year starts with personal leadership again. So what's my philosophy about how I want to live my life? And they actually write it out. They actually present it at the end of the year after they've learned mindfulness tools, they've learned mental health literacy, they've learned communication tools and healthy relationships skills. They then come to the end of that first year with a philosophy about how they want to walk in the world. By the second year, now they're starting to bring that into the community, teach their peers, co-create with their peers, teach adults. And by the third year, now they're focusing on a more career-oriented project. What is their vision for themselves? And we call it a living vision because it can change. And that's when they're starting to get mentors and coaches. Well, they have mentors and coaches throughout the whole time, but now they're definitely spending a good 6 months with just them and their coach. And they create a incubator project or a capstone of some sort that they want to do that it is representative of something they want for their career. Thank you. Next slide. So this is an example of our coaching, our mentorship and coaching model. We believe in, we call it a participatory action coaching mentorship model, where the young people are participating in their own goals for mentorship and coaching. And so, like I said, when they come out that first year with their personal leadership philosophy, they're then shaping and sculpting how they want to serve the community based on their strengths, based on their interests. So, for example, if a young person is, their family wants them to be a doctor, but they have interest in being on the radio, being public speaking. We allow them to choose what they want to focus on, and they work on that with their coach. And because, the two things don't have to be separate. And we allow them to use whatever it is that you find that brings you joy and your creativity and where your strengths are, and see how the two, how being on the radio and being a doctor or a dentist or whatever it is can come together, right? So self-mastery is what, not that we're ever going to be this one-time master, but it's a lifelong process that they're really just trying to get to know themselves. They're knowing their triggers, they're knowing their strengths, they're knowing their support systems, what type of support they need. And then they're able to make those connections, and we support them in making those connections. We expose them to a lot of people that come speak and that come work with us and volunteer with us, and they get to choose who how they want to move forward with those mentors. And then through the mentorship and through the volunteers and through everyone in the community, we're constantly, creating opportunities for young people to to develop their agency, to practice, to really take that leadership and those skills and take it into the world. Just like very well, Vicki, let's bring Joanne with us to this, just like we're doing today. This is how we roll. Next slide. So like many practitioners here, I know you have lots of wonderful program stuff. And I think a lot of us are on the same page with the importance of interactive lessons and involving young people and getting them moving, getting them up. Even when we're virtual, how can they even take leadership in the lesson as it goes? How can they do parts of the lesson? So you can go to the next slide. Again, we do a lot of focusing on identity, intersectionality of those identities and how they inform or how they relate to stress that we're experiencing and trauma and stress. And again, we deal with a lot of immigrants. So we can go to the next one. So one of the things that was very important, and like I said, learning from working in the school systems, that young people didn't have opportunities for healing. And healing doesn't happen by ourselves. It happens in community. And so we have events where we're bringing the community together. Youth can bring their friends who are not part of the program. And we have annual events. We have different types of events where they can do forgiveness rituals. They can do letting go of things that they carried with them throughout the whole year. They get a chance to talk. They also get a chance to remember those who have passed on in their community. Next slide. This is an example of when the youth go back and they create their own workshops, and they go back into the schools or into other youth serving communities, and they teach back what they've learned. And so there's Joanne on the right teaching at a school. She did, Joanne, you want to talk about that lesson real quick?
Yeah, so we did Planting Your Vision, where we got them these beautiful little seeds that when it would grow, it would have the word vision engraved in one of the leaves. And we had them focus on what it is that they wanted to be in life and how they wanted to show up, and really put that intention into the seed and physically get a chance to plant and pot their vision seed and take care of it, and know that this is how you're supposed to show up for your actual vision in life, to take be intentional and be purposeful in what it is that you do. So it was a great time.
Yeah, great. And all of our lessons, again, she said the word intentional. We always start with what's the intention. And we always have a principle that they're learning within that lesson. So I'm not sure what the principle was for that one, but the principles could be acceptance, nurturing, any of those things. You can go on to the next one. And then this is just an example of ways youth have chosen to share what they've learned. And on the right, you'll see the young people did a spot. They wanted to create their own table talk, and they created they did something on the television network. They got a chance to be on television. They talked about faith. Right, that was their choice. Talking about having faith and dealing with the violence and the dealing with the things that they deal with as teenagers in the inner city. We've done some work online with different countries in Africa, and that's in the right right bottom corner, when we're our youth are facilitating for their youth. And we have a youth empowerment cafe, and that the youth plan that, and they each get, let's say, a station to run. And so one station was healthy juicing, and they're presenting about that to other youth. And another station was, create your own motivational video. And so they're all things, and then, doing yoga and different things. So they're all things that the youth feel that they want to teach back to their community. So Vicki, if you don't mind, we just want to show you all a video that kind of seals this kind of puts it all together.
Yep, I'm going to stop share and then share with sound our video.
Okay, go for it. While she's doing that, just want to say that it's the mindfulness piece allows young people to kind of turn within, and I think it's more that than meditation per se. It's an opportunity to really, really check into their internal landscape and understand, the feelings, understand the things that happen with your body when it comes to trauma, when it comes to stress, when it comes to even just worrying about something. What's happening in your body, and what can you do with it? How can you use your own senses and support yourself through stress on a daily basis? And that's really, really what our desire is, for young people to be able to have a sense of agency over what's happening with them at all times.
Okay, see if I get this to work.
Sure.
I thank God for Jaya. It saved my life. It's becoming more clear to me what it is I need in my life and what doesn't need to be there.
Always say like you want to end up somewhere, like you say, oh, I want to be a doctor, but no one ever says like the steps to get there. So what Jaya did for me was help me get those steps clear, one step at a time.
Jaya is just the amazing baby.
The seed for their vision is already in their heart.
First workshop for Jaya was a vision board. So I learned to make my vision clear, and I'm learning how to expound on that even more. I am stepping into my leadership. My name is Leona Simon. I am a junior at Medgar College. I'm studying psychology. I'm also a participant of student government, where I am the training class president.
The great thing about Jaya's leadership program is that they constantly coach and mentor young people. They're constantly thinking about the challenges that young people are going through day to day, but using those challenges and vulnerabilities in a very positive way. So Jaya is a friend. It's a mentor, it's a coach. It's what you need to grow in, every day and just think deeply about life.
My name is Damien. I've been part of Jaya's Youth Council for the past year and a half. We have workshops. The workshops, it teaches us to basically just be more self-aware. We have to acknowledge our feelings. It doesn't come up as so argumentative. She doesn't feel attacked or threatened. She sees what I want, what I get to trigger herself. Growing up, I always knew dancing was my passion. I took a break in 8th grade, haven't yet since. Once I came to terms with this is what I'm doing, I don't care what she thinks or anybody else thinks. Now I'm getting up, I'm going out, I'm making connections, I'm going to these rehearsals, I'm taking classes, and I'm just perfecting my craft. It feels like magic.
What nurtures a vision? What grows a vision? What blocks a vision? What stands in the way? We could put the concepts, the fears, the worries, the doubts, all of the stuff that blocks our vision, put it in the water and let it dissolve. We use little stickers as representations of what would make a vision grow. Love, wisdom, joy, freedom, piece, that they really embrace these concepts and again allow the energy and the feelings and the emotions to really feed and fuel that vision for themselves.
I have to be true to myself and what I believe.
We're going to keep the vibes going on Bobby Michelle's. I am your host, of course, on 89.1 WSB. This is my vision, being on the radio, and I'm getting there. I'm taking it one step at a time. Take care of you, and that's what Jaya really promotes, and how you can excel from there. And I love Kendrick Lamar as an artist because I could just listen. He's the one artist I could really listen to and take in all of the lyrics. There's one part where he says, what's the point of loving God if I don't love myself? And I find that to be such a beautiful thing for anybody to say. I talk about stuff that matters, and Jaya taught me to do that. I would describe Jaya as a place where he can grow. Personally, physically, mentally, Jaya is really the place where you can grow, because it's literally all about you.
For any community to grow, they need to really encourage and cultivate and kind of invest time in their young people, and Jaya does exactly for that. I think Jaya is a very foundational and much needed resource that any community would benefit from. It gives young people a space to talk about how I walk through life.
Hi, my name is Janae Grant. I've been the co-chairman at Jaya for about a year until I went away to school. Jaya gave me the encouragement and the support for me to apply to go away to SUNY Purchase, which is what I wanted to do in the first place. Jaya gave me the support to properly plan my vision, to set out stages to achieve what exactly it is that I needed, to process to actually achieve your vision, and Jaya helped me throughout the whole way. My vision right now is to start creating my own business.
From meeting the Jaya kids, I can tell that Jaya does a really nice job of creating young people who are centered and thoughtful. That comes from an ability of Jaya to problem solve with youth around struggles, to give them ways out, to figure out how to give them voice in those struggles, and it really works. I think organizations like this are crucial to young people grappling with some of those struggles.
I didn't have self-worth. I didn't have a voice at the time. I didn't believe in myself. So there was a lot of self-doubt. So I felt like I had to settle for anything that I got because I wasn't worthy of what I truly wanted on the inside. Because of Jaya actually sitting me down and forcing me to learn about myself and acknowledge the flaws and love them anyway, I was able to, heal from that. I'm so ready to help other people heal and feel the love that I feel just by being in this program and this family.
Just as I am. Just as I am. Just as I am.
Just as I am. Thank you, Vicki, for sharing that. And you can pull up the last slide. I am just so honored because I'm watching this and I'm seeing how Joanne has grown over these years. And now she's facilitating for our youth. And she's got at least 3 groups of young people starting their first year with Jaya. And she's a natural. And so this picture is when we worked with Vicki for Project DOT, which was the youth program from the New York City Alliance Against Sexual Assault. And our young people partnered with Project DOT's curriculum teen dating violence curriculum. And they learned the curriculum. In the curriculum, they focus on consent, changing social norms, and harmful social norms, and also how to have more positive bystander interventions. And thanks to Vicky's work on bringing in the bystander, Dr. Banyard, we use that curriculum also in the project work. And so as the Giants went through Project Dot's curriculum, they now are, when we say their strengths just blossomed, because now they already have this sense of, wanting to share and heal and grow. And now they're getting empowered by by hearing that they can, they deserve consent, right? And that they can be a bystander, that they can really speak up about the things that they're seeing happening, right? And that they have a right to say, when a social norm is harmful. And so they were so empowered by this, they end up working, creating a program, as Vicky said earlier, where they can talk to adults about what they're learning and what they need from adults in order to continue their desire for healthy relationships. And so Vicky was very, very instrumental in helping us, really present this to the community and see if this was something that they valued. And in fact, the parents really, it was parents and all type of significant adults. And they really, really loved hearing from the youth about how, what the youth are dealing with as far as relationships and sex and violence and all of that, and talking about what they dealt with as well. So it was really, really amazing. And so at this point, I want to turn it back to Vicky, and we're gonna just have a conversation about some of the work that we've done.
Awesome. I'm just gonna pin you and Joanne so that the audience can see you all.
You are working this technology.
I am, after 2 years teaching online, I am trying. So
That's
great. So we are going to leave. Don't worry, we will leave time for questions because I know you all want to know much more from Joanne and Gena about the work that they're doing. But we have a keynote conversation for you right now where we're going to spend a bit of time together. And I'm going to be the interviewer, and we're going to learn a little more from our fabulous giant, Joanne, and also Gena. So I wonder if we could start, Gena, I know you've mentioned a little bit about this at the beginning, but to tell everyone a little bit about how you came to this work. You talked a little bit about working in the schools, but I wonder if you might say a little bit more about that.
Yeah, sure. Well, I am, from the same community that the young people who, we work with are, and I just remember being a young person who, I grew up in an environment we were told young people should be seen and not heard. And so, there were certain things you just couldn't say, or certain things adults weren't listening for. And so that was always in my heart. So when I started serving young people in the school system, it was like, okay, I'm going to be that voice for them. I'm going to be that place where they can have their voice. And, but even in the schools, they couldn't have their voice to the extent, there's some great teachers that, yes, there's always that one teacher, one guidance counselor, somebody that people can pinpoint. But, overall, we're just so busy in the schools trying to get other things done. And so, so voice was a very important thing, and coming to, to be able to create my own program. I always knew I was going to have my own program. I thought it was going to be a school for special needs at first. And then, later I thought it was going to be a after school program with, basketball and counseling and all kinds of things. But to be honest, I am an interfaith minister. And as I went through seminary and went through my own healing journey, I said to myself, well, if all of us adults are working on us healing, why haven't we provided healing for young people? Like, where's the space for that? Where's the space and time for that? And so as I'm doing forgiveness rituals or, just self-inventories, I'm thinking, well, young people need this too. And so that was my impetus for Jaya. And to be honest, the positive youth development model fell right into it. And so after that, I was just like, yeah, okay, let's do this, incorporating everything that I have experienced as helpful and healing and help me get aware, in psychotherapy as well, I said, let's pull it together and give it to these young people.
Great. Thank you. So Joanne, to you, tell us a little bit about what brought you to Jaya, why you stayed. Tell us a little bit about that journey.
Okay, so I started Jaya back in 2016, and I went to a Healthy Relationships Conference, and that's where I found Miss Gena because she was one of the workshops there. And I just fell in love. I just felt like, oh my gosh, they actually care about how I feel. And so my best friend actually ended up going to the orientation. Damien, who's talking about in the video, and I didn't get a chance to go, and he called me back and told me, you're gonna love this. They're full of social workers, and I really that's still a dream of mine, to become a social worker. So I joined Jaya. I came for the next meeting, and from the very first day, I made a connection with one of the adults there. And the first thing she told me was that, like, you matter, and that it's okay to be sensitive, and it's okay to feel. And in that very moment, that was what I was struggling with at the time, being shamed for feeling too much. And I just knew that this was a place for me, and I just haven't left ever since. And I really stayed because it focused on my transformation, my growth. And even when I'm scared, Miss Gena is right there behind me, like telling you it's okay to be scared, but you got to keep going. And that sort of gentle nudging, and just it helped me build my strengths. Because if you were to meet me back in 2016 and tell me that I would be doing this today, I would have laughed at you because I was so shy, filled with anxiety, and I'm a completely different person now. So I'm very grateful.
Wow. Well, that was the person you always were. It just had to come out.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
It was always in there, Joanne.
Wow.
So I wonder if both of you could speak a little bit before we go into the next section of the interview, where we'll talk a little bit about the partnerships, because that's another theme that really you brought out in what you were talking about with Jaya. But this strengths piece, right, Joanne? So you said you were at a kind of a youth development conference. Something drew you to that. Gena, you've talked about really the importance of strengths in terms of the community that you've been part of and that your work is serving. And that's, of course, a real passion of mine, which is trying to get us to pivot from always just thinking about risk and symptoms to really embracing and thinking about strengths. So I wonder if each of you could just say a little bit about the importance of strengths, because I feel like that's a real centerpiece of Jaya's work.
Mm-hmm. You want to go first?
Sure. So when it comes to the point of strength, when I started Jaya, I wasn't even aware that I had any. And it wasn't until I was given the opportunity to facilitate. And that's when I realized, like, okay, I really do enjoy speaking to people and speaking in front of large groups of people. And also I'm very friendly. And so learning how to make the work very personable as well. And once I started noticing, like, the different things about myself that I can use to help others, that's when more things became more evident for me. And Ms. Gena and the rest of the people at Jaya, they will never let you forget it from the way that you show up with your expression to the way that you speak. It's like, okay, well, how can you build on that? You know, Ms. Gena likes to ask us, well, what do you like? And then from that point, we're able to have a conversation. And then by the end of the conversation, I have 3 new strengths that I wasn't aware of. And so just basically focusing on what it is that each youth really enjoys, and we build from that.
Mhm.
I'll pass it to Gena.
I was wondering if you could just tell them really quickly about your self-worth video.
Oh, yes. So at the end of the year for the Giants, we have a project that basically asks you to embody the principle that you were given that month and that year, excuse me, and then create a project expressing, you know, what you're going to do to take a step towards your vision with the support of your guiding universal principle. And so my principle was, I forgot what it was. I believe it was finding my self-worth. That was my video. And I created a video just uplifting myself and showing the different parts of myself that get in the way of me being who it is that I really want to be, and how has the negative parts of myself come in the way of becoming, how do I say, I allowed the negative self, I personified the negative parts of myself in order to show that I'm human and that we all have these different parts of ourselves, and that instead of fighting against these parts, let's see how we can work with these parts to flourish and to, you know, completely accept who we are, because the negative parts are still part of me and they are here to educate me on what it is that I need to heal and work on. So that project in itself, I was very resistant to it, but you know, I was right there. I was supported by my coach at the time, and she was right there with me, helping me feel it through, because this is some heavy work. And I was just, at the end, I created this beautiful video. Everyone loved it, and I was so proud because it really embodied who I was. I struggled with it because I had to be honest with myself and with the world. And through honesty and transparency, I believe that's the best way that you can teach. And so I had to be very vulnerable in that aspect. And I'm so proud that I was given the support by my Giants and, you know, my Giant community. So I'm grateful. So, yeah.
I mean, I don't have anything else to say. You know what I mean? That we were like, oh my God, call some studio, because this film this is like a film. She, you know, so talk about strengths, you know, it's the community. The community is coaching and supporting, and she gets mad at me, she goes to someone else. You know what I mean? We're all coaching and supporting.
Yeah, great. And Joanne, I know you're focused on this interview, which I super appreciate, but if you have a chance to be given a little bit of an eye on the chat, you're getting a lot of love in the chat from sharing your story and your work, both of you. So appreciate people. So we're going to shift a little bit to a slightly different aspect of Jaya that I think folks might want to know more about, which is about partnerships. And I think as you both have talked about Jaya, you've talked about partnerships with youth, partnerships with community, partnerships between youth and community. Joanne, I know I got to watch you work with adults in the community around building healthy relationships. So I wonder, maybe this will start with you, Gena, and then fold in some of Joanne's perspective. When I first met you, you were working with the New York City Alliance. I believe you started there as a partner. I wonder if you can kind of share a bit about that partnership and just that sense of partnerships in the work that you do.
Yeah, sure. I met someone, the executive director from the New York City Alliance, just, you know, in the community. And And she explained to me that they had this teen dating violence prevention program, and but they didn't have any youth, and they wanted to, they needed, they wanted, a few different cohorts of youth with different demographics to experience, especially youth from marginalized communities, to experience and receive the curriculum. And so at first I wasn't sure, like, how, I don't know, we have time, those things. But I moved past that, and it changed my life to collaborate with another organization. We have the same desire to bring young people to a place of voice and self-efficacy. And so, so I said yes. And what it involved is that we brought our youth, and at the time it was me, because we were still small staffed, and we came and we learned their curriculum. And I was like a representative of our community. And in this case, it was the Black community, because at that time, most of our group was Black youth. And I was there to kind of help them integrate some of the curriculum and really think about our community and how our community deals with dating and violence and sexual violence and stuff like that. But I get to watch these young people learn about things that Jaya hadn't talked about, which was more of this sexual, how is sex promoted in your community, and how our relationships taught in your community and stuff like that. And so it was really wild. It was really, just really great to see the young people embrace this other curriculum. And they did it, so they got so involved that we were asked to come back. And when we came back for another round, they wanted us to take it to another level. And so when the young people decided, they started talking about wanting to get more support from their families around the topic of dating and sex and stuff like that. And I knew that in our communities that parents and adults weren't talking to young people. I knew that for a fact. And they said that it mattered to them. And so the Alliance gave them a platform to now, okay, well, what do you want to do about it? Right. And so they were then they decided to do some focus groups to make sure other young people felt the same way. They did focus group with the young people, and then they did a focus group with parents, and to find out, well, why aren't you talking? So they learned how to, and Vicky's team helped us, teach them how to do focus groups. They learned how to do the focus groups. They did the focus groups, and they got that first initial conversation with the parents. And then they were able to come back another time to the Alliance, and they decided they wanted to create a workshop, because at Jaya, they have been involved in creating workshops. We involved them at that level. And so they created this workshop. And Joanne, you can talk more about what that, felt like for you. But I just want to say the workshop was 4 hours long, okay? And yeah. I was like, that's not gonna work. But, I didn't want to put my, adult voice in there in that way. So I just let it happen. And it ended up going through as a 4-hour workshop, or 3.5 or something like that. But I'm gonna turn it back over to you, Joanne. But I also want to say, I'm sorry, is that, when we partner with, partnering is not just partnering with another organization. It's really also partnering with the youth and really working it through with them, and really having them at the table at all levels, all stages of the work. We have young people who have had ideas for Jaya and have created workshops that we've turned into an internship, and so they're already passing on their legacy as young people. So I'm gonna just turn it to you, Joe.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Gena. The Bridging the Gap workshop It was one of the best workshops ever. I got a chance to meet Vicky, which is super exciting, and working with Rutgers was really fun. But yeah, like I did things I never thought I'd do, focus groups, and then we all split up the audio and we all had to record, type up the recording, which was a experience in itself. But the positive feedback from the parents and the youth afterwards was honestly just mind blowing. And I remember that day it brought me to tears, because I felt like, wow, like I really made a change. Growing up, I'm Haitian American, so I grew up in a very strict household and I didn't really have much of a voice, because my parents only worked with what they had emotionally, you know? So through Jaya, I learned to forgive, but I also realized that maybe I can be the person that I needed when I was younger. And so when we were creating this workshop, like the parents have a voice in this too. I'm sure that speaking to their youth about sex and dating is just as uncomfortable as it is for the youth. So why don't we just hear both sides out and come up with a way to bridge that gap? And we did. And turns out that we were all sharing the same fears with our parents. And so being able to then help create safe spaces, teaching parents how to create safe space for their youth to have such a heavy conversation about dating and sex was just phenomenal. And it was magical because even in the crowd, there were some parents that were there with their youth, and they would be asking a question and they'd side-eye their kid. And we had to correct that in that moment, let them know like, this is a safe space. So the judgment and all that stuff, it can't be there. And we were able to have real teachable moments in the crowd. And it was honestly phenomenal, especially working with the Project Youth as well. So it was really great.
Joanne went on to start teaching Project curriculum to other youth, and she still does. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and Joanne was part of the inaugural Project Online, right? Pandemic-induced online dot and photo voice, and you really paved the way. We had a chance to work with you and some other facilitators on doing photo voice with the youth during the pandemic online, which was really groundbreaking and taught me so many things. So so I think, you both really talked about how there's the interpersonal connections, youth to significant adults within the community. There's connections between organizations in the community, and how that not only kind of helps, it creates those new opportunities, right? That Gena, you were talking about earlier in your remarks about the foundation of Jaya, and that creating connections and using those connections to then create those opportunities. And I've always just been really amazed at how all of that works.
Yeah. Through the Alliance, Joanne also personally got to remember the magazine.
Yeah. So I was a part of the Survivors magazine. So this magazine just basically uplifts survivors of sexual assault. And that was my first time speaking out about my story and being able to have my own creative take on it and tell my story the way I wanted to tell it and express myself the way that I wanted to. And it was a truly beautiful and extraordinary experience.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, collaboration is important.
And youth voice. I mean, I think you've also talked about collaboration, but also about really making sure, and I think you both have said this in different ways, making sure that the process of how those collaborations happen are such that youth voice is included, and not just included in a way that adults are structuring it, but Joanne, as you say, like in talking about this magazine, like you can tell your story the way it makes sense to you to tell it, right? As opposed to a way somebody else says that you should tell it. So I really appreciate you sharing that. I wonder if we can switch to another way that Jaya and that you all have worked related to enhancing youth strengths, which is that one of the cornerstones of Jaya is mindfulness, right? And from a research perspective, I'm really all about mindfulness practice, right? It's like when you look at the science, and meta-analyses and all the fancy statistics, the thing that comes out and that wins just, over everything else is some kind of mindfulness practice. So I wonder if you both can talk a little bit about that as a piece of Jaya and a piece of this strengths-based practice.
Mm-hmm. Well, I want to say, so mindfulness is, an Eastern practice that, we've adopted in the West. Yet I think awareness and self-awareness is something that we all can relate to, right? And so it's not about trying to, so we use, like, for example, we use now we use the Learning to Breathe curriculum. It's a curriculum to teach young people about breath and mindfulness. And so if you don't have any curriculum and you want to look at some of the, you want to find a guide that, it's I think Broderick is the last name, but Learning to Breathe is the curriculum. And so it's really about having young people understand. It's the principles of mindfulness-based stress reduction. It's helping young people understand how to self-regulate, right? And how to be in touch with, if there's nothing else I can control in this world, I can control my breathing, hopefully, if we're able to do that, right? And so, and that is the beginning for young people to turn within, to just even feel my own inhale and exhale as an opportunity for me to turn within and take the focus off of what's happening around me. So I think in this world of this so much violence and trauma and stuff going on all the time, that mindfulness is that way of escaping without grabbing something outside of you. And that becomes their own strength. That becomes a strength that they didn't know they had, just to touch base and take care of themselves in their own way. It's also a way of doing it without anybody even really noticing, right? And so it's important that though that we bring that into the picture in ways that our youth can relate to. Right. And so we're not asking them to sit there in a yoga nidra position, or, we're not asking to do, we can teach them everything. Right. But what they end up doing is what feels good to them. Again, strength based. Right. What feels good to them. And so just the awareness, and we teach them that the principles of awareness, acknowledgement, and acceptance. So as you're being mindful, what are you aware of? What do you need to acknowledge about what you feel, what you think, what you want to do? And then what do you need to accept? And we teach that as the beginning of, a way to deal with either change or healing or growth, that those are the first three things. And so when we say mindfulness, I just want to make sure that you're understanding it's not just meditation or the traditional things that we've learned from the East. And I also want to say that, in the teaching of mindfulness, and I think mindfulness and social emotional learning go hand in hand. We have, again, we have to make sure that we're incorporating it in ways that the young people that you serve can use it, right? And so, for example, I was sharing with Vicki that Jaya went into the schools and we went to do a workshop. And in that workshop, we were talking about, we did a little bit of breath work and, just turning within. And we were doing a whole other workshop, but in the middle of the workshop, the bell rang and the supervising teacher in the room said, "Oh, Gena, you're gonna love this." And the announcer came on and over the loudspeaker, and they said, welcome everyone to our mindful minute. And I was like, oh, and the young people were like, and so I'm like, okay, what's what are we doing, right? And so, welcome to our mindful minute. And they said, okay, everyone, put down your pens, get comfortable in your seat, and we're going to take a breath. And all of a sudden, everybody starts getting up. People are throwing things out in the garbage. People start taking out their phones. It was just chaos, like more chaos than I had in the workshop that I was doing. It was no chaos there. They were attending to me, and now it was chaos. And so I'm like, well, what's happening? Like, where's everybody going? And one of the young people said, oh, we don't pay attention to that. Another person said, this is a time where at least the teacher stops talking so we can do what we want. And then I noticed like one or two kids in the back who were actually sitting quiet and probably could have used that moment, and so I wondered, like, and the teacher just allowed all that to happen. And so I wondered, like, what are we doing? I just wondered, what are we doing? What is the point? And so one young lady said, well, I don't think about, this is not the place to do this. We're in the middle of class. This is not the place to do this. And I was like, well, you know what? You have a point there. And so it made me think, how are we creating safe spaces for young people to practice things like mindfulness? How are we creating spaces where, that's safe, that they feel comfortable, that they're able to really pay attention, and then how are we teaching young people, the value of it? We can't just stick it into something we're doing. And so if anything, I want to leave you with is, if you're trying to do something new with mindfulness, get some support, but the bottom line is creating that safe space for them to be able to do that in, and really, really helping them understand the hows and the whys and what mindfulness can look like in their own life.
Great. So I'm wondering, Joanne, if I can just skip over and ask you a different question, or if you want to talk a little bit about the mindfulness piece, because the next question for you is actually sort of related to this, which is about the importance of youth leading and collaborating, right? So I think, Gena, what you've left us with is, okay, mindfulness can be important, but you need to think about a safe space. You need to think about the appropriate space. And by extension, like, you learned some things by talking to the youth in the class, like they could have given the school some feedback about what might have worked or not worked. And so, Joanne, I'm wondering, the programs we've talked about today, we've centered on Jaya. I mentioned a few others in my presentation. You all have talked about Project DOT as well. They value providing youth with opportunities to be change makers. So could you tell us some from your perspective about how Jaya prepares youth for leading, for using their voice, for collaborating? Just tell us a little bit more about some of the things that you think we should be paying more attention to in our practices to kind of make sure that happens in a real, genuine way.
Okay, absolutely. That's a great question. And this is going back to what we were talking about earlier, with just focusing on strengths and literally getting a chance to understand the youth that you're working with, because they're all different. And when I joined Jaya, I was really shy and I wasn't aware of any of my strengths and talents. And I had to make sure that the space was safe enough for me to come out of my shell. So aside from creating the safe space, also like positive reinforcement and just support. This was my first time being in a room with adults that actually cared about what it is that I had to say. And so when I noticed that they wanted to know more about me and what I thought, that made me excited to, jump into whatever it is that we were doing at Jaya. And once we found out what, my strengths were, that's when Gena provided me with more opportunities to, work out on those strengths. And, so for example, at Jaya, on the Jaya Youth Council, we have an agenda, and every week someone else gets the opportunity to create the agenda, assign people roles. And then also when we create workshops or we're practicing to prepare a workshop, everyone gets a position. I might be doing the mindful moment today. Tomorrow, Ms. Gena will be doing the icebreaker, and just getting everyone, acclimated with, what it feels like to facilitate. And then you get to see what you're good at. Like, okay, Joanne, you're really good at mindful moments. So we'll know to work more on that with you. And then someone else, their strength could be the check-in questions and welcoming people in. Just giving everyone an opportunity to try out different things and give them choices. Because a lot of times we don't know that we have a choice with everything. And that it's okay if sometimes our choices is no, or if we want to do something else. There's always going to be something that you're good at and that you can work on, and that can really push you to the next level. I think that's what we focus on at Jaya.
Great. Thank you. Gena, do you have anything you want to add to that? And just
I wanted to say, exposing them to a variety of people and mentors, because I might be with Joanne all day and don't catch a strength of hers, but someone else with a different lens for a different, perhaps they have a different career, route or whatever, but someone else from a different lens can see a strength in a different strength in that same person I'm looking at. And so exposing them to a variety of people, role models, people that have things in common with them, things that have people that they have things in common with, really getting a chance to expose them to people and places and taking them places, I think opens up more and more strengths for us to support them with.
Great.
Gena, Vicky, and Joanna, I have several texts here from our scientific director, Don Mikevan, who wants to, in the spirit of this conversation, join you for a moment. He wants to ask you a couple of questions. Would that be okay?
Oh, sure.
Great presentation, and I applaud this initiative. I have two sets of questions that would be perhaps instructive. First of all, given the scope of the problem, can you tell us how you get the money? How do you get into the schools to get into these things? There are a number of kind of really practical steps over and above the benefits that I think the audience would like. And then I'll comment on the content if I may.
Sure.
So tell me how you pull it off.
Okay, I will tell you. Jaya is homegrown, so I can tell you one thing. A lot of it started out volunteering. We have a big volunteer base of professional consultants who have supported us in the beginning before we got grants. So social workers, coaches, that's why they told her, oh, there's a lot of social workers there. A lot of professionals came in to help get us started and to help get the work done. And myself included. I didn't get paid for 10 years, I'm just gonna say. But then, when the grants come, they start coming. And the thing about the grants, I'm just gonna say this, I didn't know this, but it is who you know. It is who you know. I'm just gonna say that. And but
so are these local grants or states, or how?
So we started with local grants. We started with small little community grants, right? And with the schools, we did contract with some of the schools. So the schools would, actually pay from their own, for example, social emotion, SEL funds, or they have professional development funds for the young people. And so they paid for that. And then since COVID, And since people are now realizing that what we've been doing for all this time is important, that the social emotional lives of young people are important, now there are even more grants or foundation grants available, and also in the state as well, they're offering more grants for
Great.
this type of work, mental health and stuff like that. Yeah.
Great. The Melissa Institute actually had a conference just on that, and they got it to the state legislature in Illinois. So you can go online to the Melissa Institute and see that the practicality of it. I applaud the initiative from the students that you put them in a consultative mode. I will throw out one cautionary note. I wrote an article called How to Spot Hype in the Field of Psychotherapy. And I think it would be worth your checking it online. In the recent book by George Bonanno on the end of trauma, on page 99, he has a critique that shows the dangers of mindfulness. Okay, so I encourage you to sort of be careful what you throw into your bucket of what you're teaching. That there's a lot of promotion of techniques that go well beyond the data. So, I'm not for or against anything, but I just want to make sure, given the variety of interventions that you've included, the second kind of observation that I'd be really interested in is how do we reach the high-risk kids? How do we reach the high-risk kids, who are, have been carrying the guns, who are doing most of the violence? How do we connect with not just the great kids that you have who are going to hang in there for 3 years, but the kids who, are more high risk? Have you had an opportunity to move in that direction?
So Don, I wonder if I could just jump in, and Gena, and I'll have both of you maybe can respond to Don's second question, but as the research geek on the panel, right?
Yeah.
I want to just jump in. I mean, I think that you raise a really important point, which is we always have to be thinking about potential boomerang or backlash effects, but I think the answer to me is really in, Gena, what you were saying about, so there's a school that has very good intention. They have a mindful minute, right? But the implementation of it, if you put them in a study, right, mindfulness is not going to be working for those kids. It might actually be going in the other direction because the kids are using it to be distracted. So I think it's yes, but I think it's in the implementation, because I do think that there are lots of meta-analyses and things that are showing that these kinds of foundational strengths-based techniques are powerful. We just have to be attending, Gena, as you were saying, and Joanne as well, to the context of how that's being done. And I think the problem to some extent is that especially in violence prevention work, we feel like if we're not talking about violence, we're not doing prevention. And I think that's not true. I think that what programs like Jaya are trying to help us see is that there's a lot more foundational work. And Joanne, I think you speak so eloquently to this about helping youth find themselves and their strengths that is going to go really far in terms of trying to promote well-being. And maybe that leads into then Joanne and Gena speaking to this, how we reach higher risk groups of youth. I think there's a lot of unpacking we have to do about what high risk means, but I'll let you all jump in with whatever your definition of that is.
Yeah. Again, coming from appreciative of all the comments. Coming from the school system, I've worked with high risk youth all my life. And Jaya started with a young man who was in a gang and who was about to go get revenge on someone who had just killed his brother, his cousin. And he was the first giant. And so the it's not just mindfulness that we're doing, and I hope people have heard that as well. So we're also teaching mental health literacy. We're teaching healthy relationships. We're teaching moral education. Like I said, just very naturally by using these universal principles. And so what happens is young people are developing a sense of purpose. And so whether you're in a gang, whether you've been, if you've just been incarcerated, whether you've even, been part of violent acts towards others, all of which we've had young people in Jaya who have come through many risks. Okay, and so just because she's showing their strength, they're showing their strengths, doesn't mean that they have not experienced a lot of risk. And so this work, we get to them by helping them hone into their what makes them happy, what makes them tick, and we really go deep with that. And if they can't find it, by being around a community of other young people who have starting to find their sense of joy and their sense of purpose, they then begin to start wondering more about theirs. Okay, so the first young man that came into that helped me get really clear about what Jaya needed to be was, like I said, grieving someone who just got killed in a drive-by and wanting to go back and get revenge. And when I talked to him about grief, and I talked to him about this cousin who had just gotten shot a day ago, the conversation went into a sense of, well, we went through grief, we went through what do you believe about life and death? And then we went into a sense of why is he here and his cousin, we don't know why his cousin was gone, but why is he still here? Because he was feeling remorse, survivor's remorse. And as he started thinking about why he was here, he started thinking about what he wanted his cousin to see in him. And he started to go to a sense of purpose.
Beautiful.
We went into that, and that's what we built on. And of course, we have to deal with all the other things, right? But we're driving that sense of purpose and trying to get him to now. He did end up going back and getting revenge and going to jail, but came out of that still with that sense of purpose, whatever. But you know, it works. It's just a matter of as you know, dosage matters, as Vicki was saying earlier. And we're not just doing one thing.
Beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
So we want to, Joanne is going to lead us through a bit of a closing to the presentation before we get into questions, but I wonder if we could just, these are kind of short questions, I think. Gena, there in the chat, someone was asking about whether Jaya has some kind of guidebook or materials that can help get similar programs started elsewhere, and whether you get youth referred to you or kind of, you know, how you find the program. I wonder if you might speak to that a little bit, and then we're going to turn it back over to Joanne for a little bit of closing before we go to broad questions from the audience.
Yes. So we definitely get young people from the schools. We recruit through the schools. We go out to the schools. We have connections with some schools, and so we get young people from there. We do go speak at conferences, youth conferences. We do go out into community. If you want us to come, we come, and so young people are recruited at those times. That's basically it. We don't really turn away anyone in particular unless their intention is to harm, but we really, our doors are open. And what was the other question, Vicki? I'm sorry.
About whether there are any sort of materials or guiding things for Jaya that might be useful to someone who wanted to start a program like this somewhere else, for example.
Yeah, we have some curriculum materials. We have not fully published it yet, but we're working towards that for the end of this year. But we definitely have curriculum materials and a training guide coming. Mm-hmm.
So if folks monitored the Jaya website, I might put that in the chat in a minute, then would that be a place to kind of see when some of those things might come online or?
Yeah. And they can follow us on Instagram and as well. Yeah, keep in touch. You can write me from the website.
Okay. Great. So I'm going to share my screen with our last couple slides, and Joanne is going to get the last word as.
Yeah, while you're doing that, you go ahead and do that, Vicki. I just wanted to say my last word is, we want to think about, yes, young people are facing a lot of violence out there. And we also want to think about how can we support them in ways that are going beyond just resilience, beyond just bouncing back. How can they actually get a chance to flourish? How can we, allow them to understand that through their strengths, through their interests, they can flourish? Is that possible? When I was speaking to the young people, they were saying that, from COVID, they're just pushing through. They're just, still struggling and just pushing through. And when will they get a chance to just be, not just, but get a chance to be okay with the challenges that they're facing and incorporate that into their expectations in life? When can they get a chance to have a sense of I'm flourishing. I'm really, standing in, I have platforms to stand in my power and stand in my voice. When can they have that opportunity, and how can we support them in flourishing, not just bouncing back and not just struggling? And so I just want to put that question out there for all of us. Any type of young person can flourish if we have that in our consciousness. And I'm going to pass that to Joe.
Thank you, Ms. Gena. So yes, we want to talk more about how we are flourishing and not struggling, and really encourage the young people to do the same. Ms. Gena said something really amazing. I had to quote her in our conversation the other day, where flourishing doesn't mean the absence of challenges, but it is about the awareness, acknowledgement, and acceptance of what you're experiencing and the choices that come from it in order to learn how you can move forward. So in this moment, I want to just read you two sections from Tupac Shakur's diary, talking about, persevering through the hardships. So the rose that grew from concrete. Did you hear about the rose that grew from the crack in the concrete? Proving nature's law is wrong it. Learn to walk without having feet. Funny it seems, but by keeping its dreams, it learned to breathe fresh air. Long live the rose that grew from the concrete when no one else ever cared. And next we have, we wouldn't ask why a rose that grew from the concrete for having damaged petals. In turn, we would all celebrate its tenacity. We would all love its will to reach the sun. While we are the roses, excuse me. This is the concrete, and these are my damaged petals. Don't ask me why. Thank God and ask me how. How did I persevere? How did I get to where I am today? Because every single one of us sitting in this Zoom room right now is purposeful. And so in this moment, I invite you, I would love to invite you to take a mindful moment with me and Ms. Gena, to take a moment to acknowledge your own awareness of how far you come. So if you're willing, I invite you to close or lower your eyes, or you can focus on something other than your screen in this moment. Right? So I invite you to take a deep breath with me. Inhaling through your nose. 1, 2, 3. And exhaling through your nose. 3, 2, 1. Let's do this one more time. Inhaling through your nose. 1, 2, 3. And exhaling through your nose. 3, 2, 1. As you continue your breathing, bring to mind one of your biggest accomplishments that have made you so proud of yourself. What inspired you to accomplish this goal? Was it suggested to you? Was it something you wanted? When you think of that accomplishment, was there ever a time on that journey where you felt scared, confused, or discouraged? What did you have to acknowledge about the fear and challenges that came up for you on this journey? What was an awareness that came after the acknowledgements about yourself? What was your process in accepting your circumstances that led you to the finish line of your goal? Let's take a breath. Inhaling through your nose. 1, 2, 3. And exhaling through your nose. 3, 2, 1. Let's acknowledge how you've made it through all life has thrown at you. It was scary and confusing, but you still flourished. Like a rose in the concrete, you beat the odds. And if you haven't heard it already, we are so proud of you. I invite you to place one hand on your heart and repeat slowly after me to yourself. I am worthy. I am powerful. I am smart enough. I am good enough. I am loved. I am successful. Just as I am. Just as I am. Just as I am. Now let's take one final breath together. Inhaling through your nose. 1, 2, 3. And exhaling through your mouth. 3, 2, 1. And slowly open your eyes. I thank you all for going on this journey with me. And if you can, if you'd like, drop in the chat to say how you're feeling in this moment.
Thank you, Joanne.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for this time. You know, one thing it's really precious is to be around a group of young people and just relax together. And so I thank you for this time and for just joining us and listening to what we had to share. Take care.
Thank you, everyone.
So we have a bit of time for questions. So I don't know, Etione, how you prefer, if people can just type them in the chat, or I know we're a big group, so hand raising is probably not going to work.
Well, I have a suggestion also in the spirit of the interactive presentation that you made. And first, let me just tell Gena, Joanne, and Victoria that we also are very grateful to have you with us today. So thank you very much for taking us in this direction. We have actually in the audience an immense amount of expertise and talent. I don't know if I've been able to peruse through, but we have some incredible people
Absolutely.
that are really present. And I don't want to really call them up like that, but I know some of them have written. Deborah Pepler, one of our scientific board members and a renowned developmental psychologist from Canada is there. She wrote a couple of nice, interesting, thoughtful comments. Deborah, if you want to say something, I'd like to call you on. And also maybe James Henderson, a friend of mine for 30 years in the domestic violence movement, is with us. That he's a very bright, insightful person. We have Heather Winters, who has a leadership role and director of programs, clinical programs at the Jewish Community Services. So I'm inviting all of you, Sandy Capuano, a former student of mine at Boston College, who's grown up to be an outstanding leader in the field of domestic violence. Since you're all there, if you want to make any kind of contribution, you, as well as others, just proceed.
Yeah, and I want to shout out Claudia Reyes Kilodra. If you want to share anything, I would love to hear about your work.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, Deborah, you go.
I'm just going to take a moment.
Thank you. Thank you. So I don't know, but my English is not that the best. I try to looking for the best signal for my home. I live far away from the Santiago, so it's kind of hard. Okay, but I first of all, I would say that thank you so much for being here and share with you. I work with juvenile offender here in Chile. And the story of these children are very similar that around the world in terms that they are very vulnerable in terms of child abuse history. And also, even though we don't have this kind of gun factor here, nevertheless, they are so vulnerable because the poverty, because the education level is very low, and they belong to vulnerable families. So for me, it's so important to hear you because I can see how you work, how you approach these juveniles. You can prevent a lot of things, how you can understand not only the offenders and the criminal behavior, but to understand the vulnerable history and how you approach them. I believe that you gave us very powerful tools, and I appreciate and say thank you so much for being here and share with you this experience. I don't know how was my English, but
thank you very much. You can mute now. Yes. All right.
Thank you,
Deborah.
Thanks so much. I wanted just to share my appreciation that I've seen flowing through the chat for not only your extraordinary work with youth, but your ability to help us move into that space. And I've been struggling with this issue for a week, as I was at a child rights meeting, and they talked about a term that was coined in 1974 called childism, which is that we see children as less than, we see them as less entitled, as less deserving of rights. And it strikes me that you are bringing youth to the forefront and seeing their fullness and helping them see that, which is so important. And I work a lot in Canada with Indigenous communities and have come to understand that their worldview puts youth at the forefront. And I think in Western societies, we tend not to do that. We have so much to learn from programs like yours, from people like you, around how to bring youth into their fullness and move them from the margins to the center.
Yeah. Thank you, Deborah. And we're learning too, because trust me, I did not grow up like that, right? I did not grow up like that. So we're learning too, and the thing is the intention to, letting the young people know that this is our intention. They help us do it. They catch me, Miss Gena, can I finish my sentence or something, they help us. So it's really, if we have the intention and we put it out there, and that's what I said, we co-create, we do this together. So you can too. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
We have also in the audience a Arlene Basel, the Director of Violence Prevention for the National Resource Center on Domestic Violence. And she contributed a number of things in the chat. Arlene, feel free to come on the mic if you, I know you always have something on your brain that you want to share.
I am. Thank you so much for inviting me into this space. Gena, Joanne, Victoria, this was amazing. I'm at the National Resource Center on Domestic Violence, and I will be reaching out to you, Gena. That's what I noted. So Etienne knows, yes, I'm like, okay, yes, I definitely need to reach out to Gena as we continue to expand our youth engagement work. And we are doing quite a number of things related to enhancing our relationships with young people. And you've given us lots of nuggets and lots of information. My colleagues are also here today to move our work forward in a meaningful way. And those are the key words. And like Deborah said, we are really focused on moving youth from the margins to the center. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Arlene.
So if anybody, James or anybody else, Sandy, or anybody else who wants to raise a hand. We have so many people here. We'll take a little while to look at the hands, but Heather, what's on your brain? There you go. I can see you.
I was going to say, thank you so much for sharing. It was very moving, and it's very clear the engagement with the youth. And what stood out for me is that it's not just surface level, that it really is life-changing and planting seeds and establishing roots, because you see the transformation. It was evident in how you showcased the program and the services. So thank you for that. And I guess, my question would be, what's the magic sauce for that? Because I feel like sometimes, especially when we're doing school-based work, time is limited, and to really be able to go in there and do the deeper work is key. And second to that would be, in my experience with some of our programming, working with very high-risk youth in communities coming from a lot of violence. There's a lot of challenges engaging the parents and getting the whole system involved, if you will, because we also know that is critical to maintaining those roots. So everything that the youth are learning and the transformation that is happening, making sure that transitions into all of their environments. So any tips for engagement with the parents?
Yeah. That's always that's a common issue. And at first I want to speak to when you say, being in the schools. I have found that unless you're in the school physically, like on a permanent basis, that it's more helpful if that, even though you're going into the schools, if there's a way that youth can access your program outside of that school, because just the school itself sometimes is a barrier for young people to have certain breakthroughs. So I just want to put that out there, even if it's one Saturday a month, one Saturday, in 3 months, we're all coming together outside of school, that really makes a difference to go deeper. And as far as the parents, and I wanted to speak to the fact that Jaya's 3-year program happened organically. The kids kept coming back. We didn't mean for it to be 3 years. They kept coming back, kept sticking around and wanting more. So we kept giving them more. But to the point of the parents, they're busy. So it's really, the young people have been the connection to bringing their parents in. And we don't have a magic sauce for that yet. But the young people, through us really getting to understand what's going on with their parents, with them, and then and how it connects to their parents, us being willing to be that bridge. We've gone into homes, we've gone, we've created things that we've gone into churches, right? to reach parents. So you have to kind of meet parents where they are. You can also use the youth to really kind of make that connection. It's still something we're building on ourselves, but firstly, we created this space that youth can be without their parents, and that's huge for them. And so we focused on the youth first, and then deal with the parents kind of like organically as needed and in that kind of way.
So now let me bring this portion of the conference to an end. And just I have James has James has a hand up.
But
So, okay.
I don't have to talk, man. I don't necessarily
No,
know
go
that
ahead.
I don't necessarily know that I have my thoughts constructed well enough to speak, because I'm looking at this from multiple different directions. One is a child who grew up in a home where there was family violence and was ripped out and put into foster care and given a lot of services. I felt I felt more disempowered by the more services that were done to me, right? Having to see the psychiatrist and get put on Ritalin, having to go to special ed to catch back up, having to go see a counselor. And I thought, why doesn't somebody talk to the asshole who's hitting us and leave me alone for a minute? Let me play with my friends and be a normal kid. At the same time, I think I felt so isolated because all the work was individual. It wasn't with group work where you could see other kids were experiencing. You felt like you're the only kid that comes from a home where there's so much violence, and that your mom has to be totally focused on him and not really there for you either, right? So you have this perpetrator who's demanding all the attention and all the focus is on. So I really like the idea of having a place where kids can come together and work on it resiliency. And I do think sometimes we have to do that absence of our parents. I will say I hated going to therapy. I just hated it. I just thought it felt so punitive to me, but I loved my school social worker. And so because you're in the school, I think that might make a difference. And I think my school social worker once defended me to a teacher. So then I felt like she was on my side, and she swore in front of me. I know that seems stupid, but because she said, who gives a shit what they think? It felt like she was with me, right? She wasn't trying to be all professional.
Absolutely.
So that engagement was so very important. I do have a question for you. When you're working, you said you go to the families' homes. Are any of those men in batterers intervention that you're going to their homes too? And does that change the way that you work with the children and the families, or not?
Say that one more time. Is any of them?
Are any of the parents, are any of the men in like a behavior change program, like a batterers intervention or a domestic violence intervention program?
Of the homes that we've had to visit thus far, no one has been in an intervention program. These were just regular parents dealing with those issues, but not connected to any programming. No.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
This is really a big fault with our system right now, right? If it's criminal court, we will focus on the offender, and the victim can do voluntary program, but the children are often absent from the criminal justice system. We don't talk to the kids. The cops don't talk to them. The prosecutors don't talk to them. Probation doesn't talk to them. They're just left out there on their own with no voice.
Absolutely. Yeah.
James, I appreciate very much. We're gonna move forward. I think Vicky, I see you had your hands up.
Just say, feel free to reach out to us, right? We can put our emails in the chat. Gena put Joanne put the Jaya website, so we can continue the conversation. I know there's still a lot of rich learning to happen today, so thank you so much.
And we're looking forward to all the other presenters. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanne. Thank you, Gena. Thank you, Victoria. And so